The Earth has been around for a very long time. By doing research on the layers of rock, we can find out about its past. That kind of research is called historical geology. We know that living things have changed over time because we can see their remains in the rocks. These remains are called fossils. So, we know that the animals and plants of today are different from those of long ago, and the further we go back, the more different the fossils are. How has this come about? That evolution has taken place is a fact because it is overwhelmingly supported by many lines of evidence. At the same time, evolutionary questions are still being actively researched by biologists. Comparison of DNA sequences allows organisms to be grouped by how similar their sequences are. In 2010, an analysis compared sequences to phylogenetic trees, and supported the idea of common descent. There is now strong quantitative support for a formal test for the unity of life. Why does altitude cause headache? Since the air is thinner, there is less oxygen in the blood, so blood flow to the brain increases. The extra blood can cause blood vessels to swell and tissues to press on the sensitive membrane that surrounds the brain, resulting in a headache. But not everyone develops a headache at moderately high altitudes, partly because the low oxygen content of the air causes the climber to breathe more often, forcing carbon dioxide out of the blood. The body reacts to the lowered carbon dioxide content of the blood by decreasing blood flow to the brain. An individual's susceptibility to altitude-induced headache, as well as the severity of the headache, depends on whether the overall blood flow to the brain increases or decreases. At high altitudes, usually over 10,000 feet, steam is water that's heated to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Believe it or not, steam is invisible, you can see right through it. If you look closely at the end of your kettle's spout, you'll notice that the white stuff doesn't start right away. It begins billowing about half an inch away from the nozzle, with clear gas in between. This clear gas is the actual steam. The billowy white stuff is what the steam turns into when it hits the drier, cooler air of your kitchen. Those white billows are, in fact, clouds, not steam. In many ways, they are identical to the clouds you can see in the sky. The white color comes from tiny liquid water droplets that have condensed from the steam. More accurately, these billows are a type of cloud called a mixing cloud. These can form when two separate air masses with different temperatures Sweetened condensed milk is a good ingredient for sweet recipes because of all the added sugar, about 25% by weight. But when sweetened condensed milk was invented in the 1800s, the original reason for adding sugar to the milk was not for flavor, but for protection against spoilage. And it works even after you open the can. Sweetened condensed milk keeps longer than fresh milk. That added sugar kills bacteria that would otherwise digest the milk and spoil it. The sugar kills not by poisoning the bacteria, but by a more direct physical process. It draws water out of the bacteria so the bacterial cells shrivel and die. Each bacterial cell has a sort of skin, technically, a membrane. Water can pass through this membrane pretty easily, but substances dissolved in the water can't. Water has a natural tendency to move toward any region where there's a high concentration of dissolved substances. A bacterial cell in a can of sweetened condensed milk finds itself immersed in an extremely concentrated solution of sugar. Water inside the cell will, therefore, pass out through the cell membrane into the sugar solution. The bacterial cell dehydrates and dies in a sea of sugary water. After World War II, European countries increased their efforts to live peacefully together on their small continent. To improve business and trade, 6 countries, Germany, France, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, came together in 1958 to create a common economy and currency. These countries agreed not to use trade barriers like tariffs, embargoes, or quotas with each other. This led to a more prosperous economy in these countries. As the years went on, more European countries joined this group called the European Union, or EU for short. There are currently 21 countries in the EU after United Kingdom left. And there are other countries like Turkey that hope to join the EU. Electricity can be created in 3 main ways. The most common is through electromagnetic conversion, where electricity is generated by moving an electric conductor, like wires, inside magnetic field. The most practical example of this is a generator connected to a turbine. The turbine provides the motion required to move the conductor in the generator. This energy for motion can come from various technologies. For example, wind turbines. Hydro, or the steam created from heat produced at nuclear fission or coal combustion. Electricity can also be created through a chemical reaction. An example of this is a battery or fuel cell. Finally, electricity can be created through solid-state conversion, where electricity is generated using the structure and properties of a solid. A specially constructed solid consists of different molecules packed closely together to create an electric current when stimulated. When human females are pregnant, they're advised to stay away from alcohol, for fear of harming the fetus. And most parents refrain from giving their infants bottles full of whiskey or beer, for obvious reasons. But if you're a fruit fly, literally dousing your offspring in alcohol is apparently one of the best ways to protect them from danger, particularly from certain types of wasps. How and why? Let's back up a bit. First, certain types of wasps prey on fruit flies by injecting eggs inside fruit fly larvae. Unless an infected larva kills the wasp egg, it hatches and the wasp larva eats its way out from inside the fruit fly larva, killing it. One way for fruit fly moms to protect against this gruesome fate is to lay their eggs in an alcohol-soaked environment, such as fermenting fruit, when they see that parasitic wasps are around. Although alcohol is toxic to fruit flies, it's even more toxic to wasps, which, unlike fruit flies, have not evolved a high level of alcohol tolerance. So, if the larvae eat enough alcohol-rich food, it can kill the wasp egg and keep it from hatching. Apparently, fruit flies are not the only fly species to use alcohol to protect their young. In fact, it seems that most flies that eat rotting fruit use the alcohol defense against wasps. So, fruit flies are not unique in this regard, but they're still mighty impressive. A sea breeze is an onshore breeze which develops around the coastlines of sea and even large lakes on warm days. In mid-latitudes, it commonly occurs during the spring and summer. This is when there is a large temperature difference between the sea and adjacent land areas. A sea breeze is a thermally driven circulation, forming due to the fact that the land heats up more quickly than the sea. Water has a higher specific heat capacity and so requires more energy to raise the temperature. As the sun radiates energy at more or less a constant rate, it will take longer for the water to heat up. This means that peak sea surface temperatures aren't reached until early autumn. This differential heating of adjacent land and sea surfaces is the main factor in the formation of sea breezes. A temperature difference of around 3 degrees Celsius is required for sea breeze to start to develop. Other factors that are required for sea breezes to form are light offshore winds at around 3,000 feet. This aids the higher level flow out to sea to get the process started. Electricity storage systems are the set of methods and technologies used to store electricity. The need for electricity storage is due to an imbalance in supply and demand on the electrical grid due primarily to an increase in renewable energy generation. These supply and demand discrepancies occur because renewables are intermittent, meaning electricity isn't produced when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, even though consumers still require electricity in these renewable downtimes. Currently, grids distribute electricity in real time, meaning electricity is being consistently produced to meet consumer demand. Electricity storage gives grid operators the flexibility to use electricity that otherwise would be wasted. This grid flexibility is highly sought after and has the potential to transform how we produce and consume electricity and is therefore being widely researched and tested. There are many different forms of electricity storage. The most common being battery, pumped hydro, compressed air, and flywheel. Currently, the largest challenges in implementing electricity storage at the grid scale are the cost and the infancy of the technology that's electricity storage. In my view, it's impossible not to talk about wildlife and not think about its role in livelihood. And I guess part of that is my own view, part of the research that I do in Africa. In most eastern West Africa, I look at the role all the humans rely on wildlife as the source of food, and also the source of income. And we talk about our wildlife, if we talking about fish, we are talking about what is probably the single most important source of protein for human that across the globe. And, so, billions of, or more than a billion of, people rely on fish as their primary source of animal protein, and most of these people living in poverty. So, the management of fish resource of wildlife in that sense causing incredibly important to livelihoods and health. And also, wildlife tourism is the multiple billion-dollar industry, and in many places, such as Africa, South America, it can be the number one source of income. It can be the number one source of foreign income for economies.